Good morning. Good morning from Doha. I am Dr. Shahina Janjuha Jivraj, Associate Professor in Entrepreneurial Leadership and Gender Diversity at HEC Paris in Qatar. And I'm still very new to the country and a wise newbie, so it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I've been blown away by the levels of conversations over the course of the summit. Now, today we're talking about leading for change and lessons from women trailblazers. And we know the impact of the pandemic has caused worldwide disruption. This has been a constant theme during the summit. Billions of children have experienced disruption to their education and not being able to access in-class teaching. And it is estimated that 11 million girls will not return to education. We are here today because we recognize education is at the core of social change, but the traditional systems of education do not go far enough to provide consistent and quality access to girls. And I'm very privileged to be here today with three amazing women. I'm in awe of them, honestly. They are trailblazers in their field and the work they do, and they bring such a diversity of experience and thinking. I think my challenge today will actually be keeping us to time in the 25 minutes because there's so much we need to talk about. So first of all, I'm really pleased to welcome Jessica Posner-Odede, who is the CEO of The Girl Effect and joining us from Kenya. Good morning, Jessica. I'm also very pleased to welcome in the studio with me Dr. Asma Al-Fadala, who is the Director of Research at WISE, and Zuriel Odewale, founder of the Susu Foundation, Girls Education Advocate. And I'm just going to say this, she was up till 3 a.m. taking her third year exam. She's a university student at UCLA, so she's doing exams. So, those of us who are complaining about not getting enough sleep, we don't have that now. So, Zuriel, thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to kick off straight into the discussion because I really want us to hear the discussions coming from our panel. And Asma, first question for you, really, to share your thoughts. You have a huge amount of experience and research perspectives and just your educational work, both within WISE and globally. But you also draw a lot on your own experiences as a working mum and a very qualified individual. And I just wanted you to just share some of the key trends that you have witnessed that have impacted formal education provision for girls. And not just now, but also what does that mean in terms of building the pipeline for women in leadership?
Sure. Thank you for the question and for the invitation. Of course, there are a number of challenges facing girls' education, either in developing or developed countries. These are either personal challenges, organizational challenges, or societal and cultural. Sharing some examples: access to learning, a transition from school to work, empowering girls and women to lead, early marriage as well, and other challenges. And I think the idea here, we know the statistics, we know the research evidence, we need to focus on the solutions, especially empowering girls and women to be part of these solutions. Of course, we have seen improvement, and I know Jessica and Zoriel will share best practices and examples, but we have a lot to work on. But I think here we need to understand why we are still focusing on this topic. And the reason for that, from my point of view, that these challenges women face have either unidentified, or if they have been identified, they haven't been resolved successfully. And I'm referring here to focus on the unheard voices of girls and women. Of course, here in this stage, we have the privilege to share our voice, our stories, but there are also unheard stories that we need to focus on when we talk about solutions. Now, moving into my personal experience as a mother, as a woman with full-time job here in Qatar, I got the support from my organization, Qatar Foundation, and from my country to have a break from my work and travel and study to finish my postgraduate with 5 children. I also got support from my family and my husband, who left his work, his career, his business to take care of my children. And I know childcare is an issue for working moms in developing and developed countries, especially now when we talk about the pandemic. Again, with all this support, the journey wasn't easy for me, especially when we talk about prioritization, work-life balance. And I know this is another topic I wish we have time to cover. But going back to Qatar, I think in Qatar here, we don't have an issue about girls' education. We have boys' problem, but in fact, the majority of students in universities are female. 70% are female students. But the problem we have, I can summarize them in 2 points. Women drop out from the workplace. Again, either personal or social, taking care of kids. And the second one is overqualified for the positions they end up holding. There is a study from a researcher in Oman. She did a study about education and empowering women in the workplace. And she identified this really interesting term. It's called المواطنة الناقصة. It means there is no match between the positions for women leaders and their qualification. Again, I want to end up with focusing on the solution, as I stated in the introduction, and I want to highlight the role of women, the role of girls in making this possible. 5 points from my side. We need to develop self-confidence and taking opportunities and taking risks without fear. Stay inspired by finding a role model. Develop a strong network, join discussion, think about your growth and your development and your well-being. Take ownership by sitting at the design table and getting your voice heard, and the other women as well. And finally, once you are at the top, don't forget to look after the other women. Of course, we can't generalize. It's not an easy journey, but these the practical steps I can share.
Thank you, Asma, and some really, really great points there coming through, and I'm sure they will provide threads for the rest of the conversations we have today. Jessica, the Girl Effect approaches education in a holistic way, going beyond the classroom and equipping girls with information, advice, and support they need to navigate life. So it really is learning beyond the classroom boundaries. Can you tell us about your work and how you have maintained a presence with girls, particularly during the pandemic, and perhaps share an example of what's been particularly impactful as well?
Absolutely, and thank you so much. It's such a privilege to be here today. I'm really thrilled to share a little bit about Girl Effect, which is that today Girl Effect works with 20 million young people across Africa and Asia. And we use the power of media and technology for young women to get the incredible advice, insight, content that they need to make different decisions. Every day through our work, we witness the tenacity and determination of this next generation of women to build an equal future. How we do this is that we connect to her directly. The pandemic has shown us that girls are resilient. They have ideas and they have the capacity to solve their own problems. So at Girl Effect, we use media, TV shows, chat bots, dramas, music, content that young people love to reach them beyond the classroom with the powerful messages that they need about their education. This pandemic has shown us that girls are resilient. They have ideas and the capacity to solve their own problems. We need to put them in control. Girls are demanding changes in terms of how they are perceived and treated. Now is the moment to design a world that works better for girls. And at Girl Effect, we're doing that using brands and media and technology. We're reaching young women where they are already, many of them on their phones, maybe through a TV show, through a radio station, through a magazine, through WhatsApp, to give them the information to inform, advise, and equip them to change their future. As we start to build back from COVID-19, I believe it's time as a world that we start to listen to girls. And this resonates so much, Dr. Asma, with what you said about unheard voices. Girls understand their problems better than anyone, and they are critical to build the solutions that work both now and in the future. So, for example, at Girl Effect during COVID, we ran a project called Hear Her Voice. We talked to 29 girls across six countries and asked them their experience of the COVID-19 pandemic. Through this, we heard her realities, we talked about her resilience, and we heard directly from girls their recommendations on what we knew to support young women in their communities. In India, for example, our private Facebook Girls Only peer to peer support group grew during COVID-19 to a community of 2,800 young women. If we can connect girls, they support and inspire one another to take positive action. This is the Girl Effect. Moving forward, we at Girl Effect are working to embed meaningful youth participation across all of our work to ensure we're really taking the perspective of young women to heart and how we program and design the media and content she needs to make a different decision, to negotiate with her parents to do her homework when she gets home from school instead of chores. And we plan to continue to scale our media and technology to equip, inspire, and educate millions of girls with the confidence and information they need. Because as you so keenly said, millions of girls are out of the classroom and may never go back. And so how do we extend educational insights, opportunities, and perspectives beyond the classroom to girls where they are every day and put them in control of changing their own lives?
Jessica, thank you. And that really lays the foundation well to talk to Zuriel. And Zuriel, you've used film to tell stories and draw attention to the challenges around girls and education in Africa, and that then has provided a springboard to advise governments and provide policy advice as well. You talk about differentiating between schooling and educating in policy, and particularly in policy planning. And I wondered if we can deep dive into that a bit more. What do you mean by that? And again, how has this been impacted by the pandemic?
Well, thank you very much for your question. So there is a difference between schooling and education. One of the things that my Dususi Foundation actually focuses on is alternative education. Now, when you go into a classroom or go into schools, you're learning the basic typical subjects. You have math, history, English, science, and all those types of things. But with alternative education, you're learning skills that you wouldn't necessarily learn in school, but they're skills that you can use to empower yourself through employment or through opportunities. And when I was 13, I started a basic filmmaking workshop. So this was back in 2016. I started it in Namibia. And basically, as a filmmaker myself, I was self-taught. So I had to learn how to manage a camera, how to edit, how to do voiceovers. And because I was able to do it, I was convinced that others could also learn this skill without having to wait until university level or waiting until film school. So I started this workshop in 2016, and then just 9 months after that first class, one of the students, and this is a class mostly of unemployed or out-of-school girls, one of the students, she went out, she borrowed a camera, and she went around her neighborhood and her community and made her first full-length documentary, which was incredible, and she got to shop it around to TV networks in her area as well, which was amazing. And from this success story, I've now done this workshop for over 480 students now in countries like Ethiopia, Nigeria, thank you. I've also done it in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Mexico as well. So that's alternative education. Now, with regards to education and the pandemic and how everything has changed, I think one of the simplest educational approaches is online learning. I've learned online almost all of my life. And one of the advantages to online learning is that there can be access for all as long as there's internet. And this day and age, internet is becoming more readily accessible to people all over the world. So this means that education will become more available to girls and students who may not have had access to it before. And then another advantage of online learning is flexibility. You know, everyone has things going on at home, going on in their lives, but with certain online programs, you can learn at your own pace. You can get ahead and you can even graduate early. I took advantage of flexibility in my online learning. I got ahead, and that's allowed me to travel and do all these various projects, whether it's speaking to world leaders, speaking to students in schools, or speaking on global stages like this.
And doing exams at 3 a.m. in the morning. And so actually listening to the three of you, there's a really common thread here about using technology, using the platform of technology, sharing unheard voices, but putting girls in the driving seat, and the self-efficacy, the confidence that's built as a result of girls practicing, learning new skills. I just wondered, because again, the three of you are such phenomenal individuals, is there anything you've heard from each other that you'd like to pick up on and either ask each other about or comment on?
Well, I know one thing when
I'd love to say,
sorry, Jessica.
Jessica,
go
let me
first,
start with
Ariel.
Zuriel,
Please
then I'll
go
come
first.
to you.
Actually, I was going to comment
That's
something
great,
that
thank you.
I was going to comment on something Jessica said with her and Girl Effect. I know they do a lot of work in technology and getting technology access for girls in parts where they don't ordinarily have access to that technology, and helping them to create communities where they can learn from each other and inspire each other. I think one very important thing is nowadays we need a lot more women, but also girl role models in our lives. A lot of the issues that we see with gender inequality and things like that, it's because there's no examples to look at and see what's possible. There's times where I've been to different schools, and when girls have seen me, they're like, wow, I'm also a girl. I'm also 12. I'm also 13. Maybe I can do that too. And part of what I do, whether it's speaking to world leaders, now I think I've spoken now for 31 world leaders about making policies, I show them myself as well as an example. Because I talk to them and I say, wouldn't you want the girls in your country to do what I'm doing too? Well, I can do this because I was allowed to go to school and get that education. So I just wanted to comment on that because I think it's so important, creating that community of women and girl role models for our next generation.
Thank you, Zuriel. And Jessica, let's come to you, and then Asma, final comments from you. Jessica, let's hear
Zuriel,
from
I
you.
was also going to say what a powerful example you are as a young woman leader. And I think that point that you've just made about role models, you spoke about it a little bit too, about the power of content, of storytelling, of narratives to shift not only what a community thinks is possible, but what a girl sees as possible. And I think that's actually part of what we really need to do is help young women and girls push their boundaries of what they expect from themselves, what they expect is possible. And I agree that online and digital tools is a powerful way to do that. And I think as we start to push new boundaries, talk about powerful examples, really like yours, Zuriel, there's also the point of just continuing to talk about the digital divide that exists for young women and how access to digital technology continues to have a gendered element. For example, boys are 1.5 times more likely to own a phone, a mobile phone, than a girl. And as other, prejudices, social conceptions exist about what does it mean for a girl to have access to an online world or a phone. And also, is there an online world that is made and safe for girls, that is created with her in mind? So I think that we need to take some of these powerful role models and examples and create new stories, new narratives that not only educate girls in math and science and reading, but also in what's possible in their lives. And that is really the next frontier for digital education.
Great, thank you. I'm going to jump into the next round of questions and come to. I'm just so conscious about time. And Jessica, actually picking up what you've just talked about, the digital divide, how do you see your work addressing this area? You've started to pick up some of the points in terms of accessibility, even to things like mobile phones, and we know that these are a big issue. But when you think about educational opportunities, what role do you see educators and tech playing? And this whole thing about tech education really playing in terms of creating a more welcoming environment for girls and women in education?
It's a great question. I think for too long, we can say that girls have been left behind when it comes to digital tools. And at Girl Effect, we're working to close this gender digital divide by designing for girls access today. So this means meeting them where they already are, whether it's via social media or simple SMS. And we've learned to do that. We have to design with girls in mind. We have to listen to girls. We can't assume what they need. We have to involve them in this design. We have to recognize that girls are a notoriously hard to reach audience. So we have to make sure there's relevant and engaging content that feels like it resonates with their lives, with where they are today. And finally, we have to make sure that we're designing products that work for her and for her level of access today in both hi-fi and lo-fi environments, because this is essential to closing this gap.
Great, thank you. And Ziriel, we've seen within the space of education the rise of civil society, and particularly in terms of providing solutions to inequalities. Again, from the pandemic, that's been one of the biggest factors we've experienced. And from an educational perspective, what have you seen? Maybe a couple of examples, or perhaps what would you like to see in terms of governments working with civil society to create new solutions to support girls in education?
Well, looking over this last year, the pandemic, it was a disruption. But what I've seen is that with disruption comes adaptation. I think online learning is still one of the biggest bright spots I've seen, because what this past year has shown us is that online learning on a large scale is indeed possible. And we could take advantage of this tried and tested method of online learning and target areas that originally had little to no access to education. And then, of course, with that comes building partnerships with stakeholders in the area to make this large-scale online learning a reality in underserved areas. And then when it comes to governments and civil societies, I think what I've learned is that with different governments, you're going to need different approaches. I know that on the African continent, because that's where a lot of my girls' education interventions are focused on. I've done work in 19 countries now, and from working with world leaders and students in schools, from what I've seen, there are some areas where there's advancements in gender equality and gender education. I know 2 examples are in Rwanda and Namibia. I did a small program with the gender minister in Rwanda, and I also met with the Namibia president, President Gingab, and did some work with the First Lady, Monica Gangos, as well. And from what I've seen, there's no one-size-fits-all approach for the African continent, because you have 54 different countries with hundreds of cultures and languages, so you're gonna need different approaches. Just for example, looking at Mozambique, I did some work there. UNICEF said that they had the highest rate of girl marriage, and one of the highest rates of girl marriage in the world. And so I went to meet with their president, Felipe Nyusi, in Maputo back in 2018. And just to talk about, well, first show myself as an example of what an educated girl can do, but then also to talk about the issues of girl marriage and girls' education in this country. And then 15 months after that first meeting, and with the help of many other voices, Mozambique formally outlawed girl marriage in the country after decades of practice, which is amazing. But here's the thing though, I had a similar conversation talking again about girls' education and girl marriage, but this time with the South Sudan president, President Salva Kiir Mayardit. I spoke to him, and then at the end he promised to start the conversation with leaders back in his country as to why girls should be allowed to go to school and get an education. But then the Civil War broke out, that was a few years ago, and sadly not a lot has been done in that area of girl marriage. But what that has shown is that what worked in Mozambique didn't necessarily work in South Sudan. So when it comes to governments and civil society, you're going to need different approaches.
You've got to go in from that very specific and understand what's going on in each environment. Okay, and Asma, very quickly, I'm coming to you. Your TED Talk, which you presented last year, discussed reforming education and thinking about putting the student experience at the heart of schools. Can you just share again an example of what that means to put the student experience at the center of learning and an example of good practice in this area?
Thank you, Shahina. And I think the example is related to the first round of discussion around focusing on the learners and to have them as part of the design of what we teach and how we teach. Yesterday also, all the sessions at least the one I attended, the plenary, it's all focusing on this area. I moderated the ministerial roundtable with 10 ministers yesterday, and the main theme, it was around how to involve the learners. So the example I'm looking here and I want to share, it's all related about how we can fix education system, not by introducing a project or an initiative, but by thinking about a system reform, by redesigning based on putting the learners, empowering them to be part of, as I said, what to teach and how we teach. This is a project I led in the last 2 years. We finished the project, the report is available, and having research and design as an engine to transform education and to introduce innovation and empower teachers.
Thank you, Asma. I am so sorry, everyone. We are out of time, but there have been so many sparks coming out, putting students at the heart of reformation in terms of education, accessible role models, starting from where girls are, technology. There are some really, really big areas, and each of these could have been a day's discussion in themselves. But please, I'm hoping these conversations have sparked lots of thinking for you. Go away, check out these phenomenal trailblazers, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.